Good afternoon. I'm Ellie Sullivan, co-chair of the Special Programs Committee of the City Club. Our program today is one of a three-part series, Northeast Ohio Naturally, a theme that is meant to showcase people and places that bear out the theory that merged elements of nature, health, and recreation as a lifestyle is on the rise in our post-industrial world. Please join us next month on November 17th to hear the third installment of the series featuring the new executive director of the Cleveland Metro Parks, Brian Zimmer. Today we are pleased to present Executive Director Tim Donovan, whose name is synonymous with the Ohio Canal Corridor and its towpath. Here to introduce Mr. Donovan today is Councilman Joe Simperman of Cleveland's Ward 3, home to the northern reaches of the towpath trail. Mr. Simperman is a gifted public representative and is a rising star in our local political sphere. He is a reliable supporter of redevelopment along the Ohio Canal Corridor. I'm pleased to welcome Councilman Joe Simperman back to the City Club podium. Joe?
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Good afternoon. Our speaker today really needs no introduction. Knowing that he is a native Clevelander, a proud St. Ignatius High School graduate, and a cum laude graduate of Cleveland State University, Tim Donovan's bona fides are well known to people throughout Cleveland. And for that, we would be grateful. But we're also grateful that this idea, which he would always credit with others, but which never would happen without him, began in 1986 as his interest in the towpath trail began when he worked with Tom Yablonsky at the Spaces Gallery, and from an idea came something to fruition. After leaving Mayor Voinovich's office to head the Ohio Canal Corridor in 1990, it was only a few years after that that Congressman Ralph Regula of Ohio initiated the designation of the Ohio and Erie Canalway. And as time came by and the bandwagon grew bigger, Tim brought more and more people on until it became one of the most supernatural, organic grassroots movements to get something positive done in our community. There are many things you could say about Tim, but people say it about him best. Whether it's Mr. Debo, who said that it's amazing to see an individual can have in a community, said the former superintendent of our park system. Tim would be the first one to say he hasn't done this alone, but he's really been one of the key players in making this happen. I really don't believe it would have taken shape, any of it at all, without Tim Donovan. I can tell you, and someone in the room can attest to this, Chris Ronayne, that Tim did something pretty remarkable a few years ago. When in the middle of a mayoral administration transition, which usually at City Hall means a time of quietness, Tim pushed through a TIF piece that will actually create the funding for the last portion of the towpath trail to get to Cleveland. Tim would credit Chris Ronayne and Mayor Campbell because he's a humble person, but it's safe to say that this entire room would second what Superintendent Debo has said, and that there would be no towpath trail without Tim Donovan. Ladies and gentlemen, the genius of the moment, Tim.
Joe, I'm truly humbled by those words. As you know, Joe and I actually share a bit of a past here in the fact that we both went to St. Ignatius High School, so we're both proud graduates of that institution. And I want to thank Joe for those comments, and I want to thank the City Club for allowing me to come here today and share a story I think that's remarkable, and perhaps a story that isn't known as well as it should be. And let me just make this statement, that Northeast Ohio is at a point in time where it can assume a leadership position in a national movement of creating heritage areas in America. I want you to remember that. That product is the Ohio and Erie Canalway, and my remarks will help explain that a little further. Joe mentioned John Debo's name, and I thought I'd start the conversation out today with sharing a story that John actually told to me back in 1993 when they were building the towpath trail through the national park. It turns out that people were so interested in it that they were actually following the bulldozer as it made its way inch by inch and foot by foot and mile by mile through the national park. And one such couple would regularly do it every Sunday morning. Well, on this particular Sunday, as they walked the towpath trail, the gentleman stumbled over something protruding from the surface of the trail, And being the good Boy Scout that he was, he had a Swiss Army knife in his back pocket, and he reached down and began to dug up what he thought was going to be a root, and he would just get rid of it for future trail users. Well, it ended up being some kind of a lamp. Well, he took the lamp home. He lived in Bath, Ohio, and he cleaned it up, and he's down in the workshop, and he actually has the brasso out, and he's giving it a good rub, a good shine coming on the lamp, when lo and behold, puff, a cloud of smoke comes out, and here is a genie before him. Well, you can imagine how surprised he was, and Genie explained that he'd been in the lamp for a long time, and obviously was very happy that he was finally released, and he had one wish left to grant this gentleman. Well, the guy was pretty well off and healthy and everything else, and he didn't need anything for himself, so he said, you know what I'd really like is if you could give us world peace. And the genie kind of looked at him and gritted his teeth and said, you know, I've been in that bottle a long time. Maybe you can kind of lower your standards a little bit. Maybe give you something a little bit easier to do. And he goes, okay. And he thought for a second. He ran across the room. He came back. He said, if you can't give me world peace, and he points to the map, to a place called the Middle East. Can you at least give peace there in the Middle East? They've been at war and conflict for centuries. And he said, again, sorry, I've been in the bottle. I don't know how much power I really have left on the third wish. Maybe something else. Well, on his third try, he said, okay, I'll tell you what. He goes, as you know, I was walking the towpath trail when I found this lamp today, and I really believe in this new movement. It's a regional movement. It's going to take cooperation of 58 different municipalities and townships over 4 counties. Park districts will all have to work together, and county engineers and convention and visitors bureaus. And everyone will really have to get on board to make this happen. And by the way, I must tell you, and be honest with you, Mr. Genie, that this is an area where there's rivalries. So Canton doesn't like Massillon sometimes, and Akron doesn't like Canton, and it doesn't seem that anybody likes Cleveland. So I just thought I'd let you know about that. Could you make this project, the Ohio and Erie Canalway, a reality? At which point the genie kind of folded his arms and said, can I see that map of the Middle East again? The point of the story there is that we often talk about regionalism, and we talk about regional projects, yet they're not easy, nor are the partnerships that we need to construct to build these regional projects. But what I'm here to tell you again is that we have a successful one underway here in Northeast Ohio. We call it the Ohio and Erie Canalway. It's a new kind of national park. It was actually first designated by an act of Congress in 1985, and what it relies upon and what it's rooted in is a piece of our history. And we have a piece of not only our history locally, a piece of state history, but we have a piece of national history here to celebrate. And that is the building of a canal that would ultimately create a waterway that would help America grow, that would help America rationalize its economy, and in the end, let New York City, as one of 4 port cities on the East Coast, become the only port city that not only had the ability to export goods, but had the ability through the Erie Canal, the Hudson River, the Great Lakes, and the Ohio and Erie Canal down to the Ohio River, to the Mississippi, to the Gulf of Mexico, to have a transcontinental waterway to ship goods and allow the Midwest to bloom as the breadbasket of America, while the industrial Northeast could concentrate on the early days of the Industrial Revolution. New York City, owning that and being the only one to own it, became the financial capital of a growing country. So the Ohio and Erie Canal helped make New York City the financial capital that it is. And if you really look into that story, what you'll find is that we were the frontier wilderness. In 1820, there's 500 people living in Cleveland. We have 10,000 in Cincinnati. The Appalachians were a real obstacle to people moving and goods moving across this country. And it's George Washington, our first president, who has this idea of building a canal. It gets executed when a fellow by the name of Alfred Kelly comes here from Connecticut and leads the drive, but it gets executed with the partnership of the state of New York. For DeWitt Clinton, who was their canal champion, their canal commissioner, becomes the governor, and Ohio, at a moment when we were on the verge of bankruptcy, floats the bonds backed by the state of New York to build this canal. Why? Because DeWitt Clinton wasn't stupid. Remember when I just told you about New York City? They became the financial capital of America. DeWitt Clinton could see that. He could see how this waterway system would open and expand America, would allow the westward ho movement to happen here in the Midwest. So that is a part of our history, and that is also a part of the history of America. For Cleveland, in particular, that canal helped set in place land uses that have extended to this day. Industrial uses in the Cuyahoga River Valley for shipping and for industry. And by virtue of that, we have brought other stories of national significance. Does the name John Rockefeller ring a bell? the world's first billionaire. He made his money in those Cuyahoga River Valley. Fellows by the name of Sherwin and Williams who get together and use a byproduct of the petroleum process to create ready-made paint. An American shipbuilding further down the line that became when Cleveland was the capital of shipbuilding in America. So we used that canal and we used the land development that happened around it to grow our riches. And as what happened in America was as our city grew and those riches grew, the business leaders one day figured out that we had left something behind. It was a time in a movement called the City Beautiful America movement. And what happened was that we forgot to put parks and open spaces into the integration of the place that we live and we called home. And so when they had the Chicago World's Fair and Daniel Burnham laid it out, we're the first one to hire him. We're the first one to hire a guy who had an idea of how you actually open up open space in a downtown urban environment, and he did our mall plan. But together with that mall plan, we also began to create a ring of parks around Cleveland's borders. Parks that, if you follow the thinking here on the east side, you had Gordon Park and Rockefeller Park and Wade Oval. You had an East Boulevard Parkway that would connect them out to Luke Easter. You had Garfield Park and Washington Park and Brookside Park and a West Boulevard Parkway, again, that connected to Edgewater Park. And if you can visualize this in your mind, you had the beginning of an emerald necklace, a mini emerald necklace, if you will, that wrapped the borders of Cleveland. By the way, unfortunately, that particular effort, and we had our own Cleveland Metro Parks taxing authority at that time to accomplish that, that effort went under when business leaders decided that the city of Cleveland was spending money buying land outside the city. But the idea didn't end. In fact, the idea grew. For under Tom Johnson, an engineer named Stinchcomb took that idea and created, in 1917, the Cleveland Metro Parks. And we all know the legacy of that great park system and how that legacy continues to this day. Now, I want you to think about the fact that at the same time, in 1917, when that's happening, on a national platform, we're creating the National Park Service. And we're giving them and trusting them to be the stewards of our great national resources, our national treasures. And over time, we say to them, you need to also be the protector, the caretakers of our history. So take over the birthplaces and the battlefields. Become America's collection of those important places. And as time went on, from that initial movement, which by the way meant that the National Park Service would own and manage all the property, all the holdings there, as time went on, the National Park Service began to adopt other kinds of areas and be involved with other situations, from national seashores to a date and a time in 1970s when, under the administration of Richard Nixon, it introduced a new kind of park for the national parks, an urban park, a park where, as President Nixon would say, a park where the people actually live. And there were three of them: San Francisco, in New York, and believe it or not, one here in Cleveland, between the cities of Cleveland and Akron, the place we now call the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. Interestingly enough, you go back in time and you read the formation of Metro Parks serving Summit County and Cleveland Metro Parks, you'll find in their notes that the Olmsteads, who are the fathers of urban parks, came to consult with them and pointed out the grand opportunity we had here locally to preserve that area that we now call the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. Neither of those park systems were able to take advantage of it then, but again, with an act of Congress and a very strong and heady grassroots organization locally, in 1974, President Ford signed a piece of legislation creating the Cuyahoga Valley National Recreation Area. Maybe few of you know that in that legislation there was an amendment tacked on by a freshman congressman from Navarre, Ohio, a fellow by the name of Ralph Regula, who saw the opportunity of not only creating the National Recreation Area, but suggested that we create a National Recreation Corridor that would follow the length of the Ohio and Erie Canal to Zora, Ohio, to the south, and put a scenic river designation along the Cuyahoga River from Rockside Road at its northern boundary all the way to the lake. Well, I'm sorry to say that Congress had enough trouble putting a national park unit in Cleveland that they couldn't bite this bigger idea. And if you think about it, in 1970s, we also were in Washington telling stories of a burning river to a congressional committee looking at clean air and water. So you could see where they might have their doubts of making a scenic river along the Cuyahoga River when they just got out of a committee that said, by the way, that burned the other week. But what it did for us was it started to lay the seeds of an idea that came to fruition for us in 1996 when a second act of Congress designated the Ohio and Erie Canalway a National Heritage Area. That heritage area movement actually was first founded with an act in 1985 that recognized the Illinois and Michigan Canal as the nation's first National Heritage Area. And what National Heritage Areas are, they're really kind of asset-based park systems. Again, you have to be rooted in a very significant story, a chapter of America's history, but it really is a collection of natural, cultural, scenic, and historic resources. It's meant not to be singularly managed as the National Park Service units, but managed with a mix of management and partnerships. So you can have both private and public lands associated with each other. And it really calls for the idea of putting an overlay of some kind of a transportation element so people could explore these, because they're usually long items. In the case of the Illinois and Michigan, it was about 110 miles long as well. Right now we have 49 designated National Heritage Areas, and just to give you an idea of the shape and size and complexity of them all, you have one that's 6 miles long in Augusta, Georgia, and you have one that is the state of Tennessee, if you can believe that. So these are strange and complex ideas, but they share those things in common. They share the abilities and the needs to connect them. They share the fact that they are parks built upon stories with interpretation. In 1996, when our act of Congress succeeded, we basically signed an agreement that said we could ask Congress for $1 million a year, up to $10 million over a period of 14 years. But here's the deal. You had to come up with a minimum dollar-for-dollar match locally, and you had to create a management plan that would show how you were going to spend the money and what the boundaries in which you would spend that money in. That management plan was created and delivered on time. I think it's a fabulous piece of planning in terms of what it's done. It's created an action plan that's allowed us to direct our investments and to actually make sure that we're making progress on all the items that are in the management plan. It was a product of 75 public meetings. We're heavy on process in this particular arena. Everything we do involves public process, and including that. So that was 75 public meetings over 4 counties held in 18 months. And what we learned from the public was this. They said, make a place where we can actively explore it. And because of that, because they said that, what we have come up with is a plan that uses 3 intermodal transportation features. A scenic railroad, a scenic byway, and finally, last and most lovingly, the towpath trail. It called for partnerships in terms of making sure that we could get and address all the issues and projects. And it was a plan based on conservation, preservation, interpretation, recreation, all setting a platform, if you will, of future local economic investment along these ways. So how are we doing? Well, we're going to be 15 years old next year, about a year and 2 months. When we began this process, they had just completed the towpath trail in the national park. They had about a mile in Akron. Today we have 84 of the 101 miles that have been projected, completed, open to the public. We also, in addition, have 12 connector trails, because for us the towpath isn't a singular spine. It's a network, it's a system, it's a tree, if you will, with branches that'll find their way down ravines and rivers and streams and connect other places and historic neighborhoods. So in the end, you really create a new alternate transportation system, especially here in Cleveland. When we first went in to apply for the designation, we had actually won a recognition as Ohio's first scenic byway. Well, we're now a national scenic byway. What does that mean? That means the Federal Highway Administration, that we were able to make a case to them that the story we represent and the system we provided deserve national recognition. We've also gone and supported the Scenic Railroad. The Scenic Railroad now not only extends into Akron, but has made its way all the way into Canton. It's got one last and most important leg to complete, and that is getting it into downtown Cleveland. The tracks are there. It's just a question of having the kind of community will and the partnerships behind it to make that happen. We've, since the original planning effort, actually done some additional planning, looking at marketing and identity and signage. The original bill called this regional heritage area the Ohio and Erie Canal National Heritage Corridor. Did you hear that one? Ohio and Erie Canal National Heritage Corridor. I dare you to sell that one to anybody. We realized that. We realized that we had to take that government-labeled name and we needed to make it consumer-friendly. And we have gone through the exercise and now have settled on the name, the logo, Ohio and Erie Canalway. And with that, we have integrated it into a very, I think, articulate sign product that we've already put now along that byway. In fact, we've gone and extended the byway so that it can meet the purposes and needs that we intended to do, which is to make sure that anybody that we invite to come and explore this particular place in this region, we will take them from the freeway. We will get them on our byway. We'll mark that byway route so they won't get lost. And as they travel that byway route in the future, they'll find signage, informational signage about the museums, the historic districts, the trailheads, the train stations, as they make their way north to south or vice versa. When they get out of their car, they'll encounter a kiosk, and that kiosk will inform them first of the big project, the Ohio and Erie Canalway, with maps and graphics on one side. And on the flip side, it'll tell you why and how the site that they're currently at fits into the larger picture and puzzle of this new kind of park, this new kind of place. And to make sure that happens, we have actually developed a very intricate interpretive framework that allows us to connect storylines to the larger project of the Ohio and Erie Canalway. How are we doing? Well, with that signage plan, we went and we asked Federal Highway through a Scenic Byway grant program for some money to implement it. We asked for two, totaling $756,000. We were awarded 2 grants totaling $756,000. First one's been implemented. Second one, we're working on it. It's got to get done. We've got to get that done because it'll create that pilot wayfinding system in a national park, and it'll start to introduce the kiosk, again, as the most important sign product we have. How about match? We were asked to do a 1-to-1 match. How are we doing on match? Well, and these are figures we're still compiling, but right now I think it's safe to say we've delivered in just pure match for the grants that we've received 3-to-1 leverage. 3-to-1 for every dollar that the federal government has given us, we found 3 local dollars. And we did a study actually trying to track investment beyond our grant program to see who else is investing along the byways and the trails. And we've come up with a figure of $250 million between 1996 and 1999. Wow, that's a lot of money. And what are those, where are those money? What do they represent? Well, they represent new homes in Mill Creek that use a trail as one of the selling points. They represent new homes in Tremont that have wrapped the ridge waiting for that trail to come. So those are the kinds of investments. They have downtown Akron, you'll find office buildings, you'll find new condominium buildings, again, built right on the hubs of the train station and the trail there. And you can travel this byway, this trailway from one end to the other, and you'll find little examples and big examples of investment coming our way thanks to that public investment. What we're talking about here is an opportunity for us to really think globally but act locally. You've heard those phrases before. You've got to think globally. You know, we can no longer compete alone. We have to compete as a region. What other project in Northeast Ohio has the buy-in and has made the project in 58 different municipalities, townships, and cities that we can boast here in the Ohio and Erie Canalway? What other project, ladies and gentlemen? When you look to go and you look to try to actually, what I suggest is cutting your teeth on the idea of regionalism, there's no better product than the one we offer. Because we don't take anything from one community to benefit another. These are the boats all rising as the tide rises with it of the Ohio and Erie Canalway. And we're at a critical moment here. I mean, we're at a moment we're about to actually launch a marketing campaign. We think we have enough of the infrastructure in place that we can start inviting tourists to come and enjoy it with us. We have a new marketing director on board here, Katie Montgomery, who's in the audience, and we're reaching out to all those different attractions along the byway, along the towpath trail that are all part of this package we call the Ohio and Erie Canalway. We think the legacy is big, the opportunities are grand. I want you just to think about Cleveland for a second here, and think about the towpath trail, because as it enters Cleveland and it enters Cuyahoga County, again, it's not that singular trail, it's the tree. There's a branch that's the West Creek branch that goes up through the communities of Brooklyn Heights and Independence, Seven Hills, Parma, all the way following a new reservation that's been thankfully adopted by the Cleveland Metro Parks. But beyond that, there's also a trail link that will link through Independence and offer their residents a direct connection to the towpath trail through property, by the way, donated by a good friend of mine, Dick Pace here, who has a center there right off of Brecksville Road. Partnerships, working together, understanding the vision of it all, trying to come together to execute that vision. In Cleveland, that vision means putting a trail up Mill Creek to the waterfall, connecting it to Garfield Park, and having a branch go down Morgana Run and cross the river where there is a railroad bridge there now to be able to cross that river and connect back with the towpath trail under the I-490. Putting a trail link down to Big Creek to connect the area's single most visited destination, the zoo, the rainforest. Having a train station in Harvard, having a trail connection down that Big Creek and beyond. Beyond, that will take you down through West Boulevard and all the way to the lakefront. Having a trail connection follow the old Walworth Run or Train Avenue through Michael's Zone Recreation down 65th, again, all the way to the lakefront. When we build the Opportunity Corridor, we better build it with a trail. We better build it with a trail because that is another way to connect neighborhoods as we grow into the future. And think about the towpath trail as it comes into the northern end of the flats here. That is where I think we have a very big and grand opportunity because we can go and reclaim that area and use it for public ownership, the waterway, the boardwalks, and connect new recreational nodes like the Rowing Foundation, new and old platforms like the Superior Viaduct in which you can look over that valley and you can understand and hear and read and understand and learn about the history of bridges from a bridge. New like the Flats East Bank, new like the casino. And as we do so, I'm going to give you an idea here. Because I think maybe as we begin to turn the page of land use in that northern Cuyahoga River Valley, we need to think about rebranding it. We need to think about striking a new title because I'm afraid the name Flats has become a very pejorative term in the modern day. And I'd like to suggest that we would take the name of the new park, the Gateway Park, that will represent the head of the National Heritage Area, Canal Basin Park, and call it the Canal Basin District. Just as you'd have the Warehouse District above and across the way the Market Square District, let us think about renaming that area and rebranding it and using that to promote what will be the greatest park that we can build in Cleveland in the end. We have challenges ahead. I'm on record of saying that the toughest 6 miles of the towpath trail that will be built, and perhaps some of the toughest miles of any trail in America to be built, is going to be built in the area of Harvard Avenue. That continues to be the same. The easy stuff is done. Now we got to do the hard stuff. It's going to get done. I'll tell you that much right now. It's going to get done. But it's not going to be easy. I can tell you Joe Simperman remarked about the TIF funding, and I can tell you that we have a great partnership in building that trail. We have Cleveland Metro Parks, who has signed on to take on the daily operations once it's completed. We have the City of Cleveland, who's an intimate partner there, looking to take on the issue of land ownership. And most importantly, because we're going to have a new day in Cuyahoga County, and that new day is going to be a new government structure, I should point out now that we are blessed to have Bob Kleiber and the Cuyahoga County engineer, the only engineer in the state of Ohio that's building a trail or has ever built a trail. And I'll tell you right now, we would not be making any progress without their help. And whoever gets elected would be well suited to keep Bob Kleiber and his team on board, because I tell you, we need them. We have money issues, but I'll be honest with you, we've raised quite a bit of money. We probably are nearing $50 million that we've identified and raised toward a $75 million package, including the Canal Basin Park. So money is not the issue. The issue is going to be will. The issue is going to be prioritizing. What I'd like to do is end by giving you two quotes here. The first is, I grew up in the 60s, and I was influenced by certain people that grew up in that era, and one of them was Bobby Kennedy. And Bobby Kennedy had a quote that said, "Some men see things as they are and ask why. Other men dream things that never were and ask why not." Well, I'm one of those why not people. Why not put a trail? Why not put a greenway through an industrial workshop in Cuyahoga Valley? Why not connect those neighborhoods of the city of Cleveland, those historic districts, into a system that can one day not only act recreationally, but can provide an alternative transportation to two key employment nodes in downtown Cleveland and University Circle? Why not have a byway designation that we take advantage of to go and promote and bring people to this region? Why not? Why not people are the people that see the glass half filled. Joe Simperman's an why not people. In fact, I think most of the people in this room are why not people. So we need to take the few that are not in our camp, and we need to convince them. There's plenty of room for foundations and corporations to get way more involved with the project that I've just spoken about. We've made tremendous project. We probably stand as one of the best examples of this heritage development in the country today. That's why I say we're at a point to assume that leadership role. We will be assessed by the National Park within the next year. We will be compared to others, and I am fully confident we'll come back and tell you just what I'm telling you now. So I invite you all to get more involved, and I leave you with another slogan, and this is a little commercial slogan. It's only 3 words, but it's 3 words that continue to echo every time I have a public meeting, especially about the Towpath Trail. The 3 words, just do it. Folks, it's time for us to just do it. Thank you very much.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening to a special program featuring Tim Donovan, Executive Director of the Ohio Canal Corridor. We will return to our speakers momentarily for our traditional City Club questions. We encourage you to formulate questions for our speakers now and remind you that your questions should be brief and to the point. We welcome all of you here, especially those who are guests. We hope you will join the City Club and be active in our ongoing civic dialogue. This Friday, October 29, the City Club welcomes Gary Rivlin, journalist and author of Broke USA, How the Poor Became Big Business. Friday, November 5th, the City Club welcomes Kenneth Thorpe, Ph.D., and Robert W. Woodruff, professor and chair of the Department of Health Policy and Management, the Rawlings School of Public Health at Emory University. If you wish to make reservations or order a CD or DVD of today's program, please call 1-888-223-6786 or locally 216-621-0082. We are pleased to welcome guests at tables hosted by the historic Gateway Neighborhood, Michael Baker Company, and the Ohio and Erie Canalway. Thank you for your support. Now we would like to return to our speakers for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding the microphone today is Special Programs Committee Co-Chair, not just a member, Co-Chair Mike Kallstrom on my left, and City Club Program Director Carrie Miller on my right. Now, our first question, please.
Hey, Tim, congratulations on all your good work. I see we're almost to the end of the line here. How does regular lay people get involved to help you out with this other than corporate America? Is there something we can do, we can sign up, or we can get our people in the offices to help you, finish the job?
Okay, well, that's a great question. I couldn't have penned that one better myself, Sandy. Well, the first thing I'd like to say is, one of the things that we do, and we have a partner group in Akron as well, the Ohio and Erie Canalway Coalition, we offer programs. We do events and programs every year, and I'm proud of the programs we do. We do a big cleanup called River Sweep every May. In fact, I think it's one of the largest done-in-a-day cleanups in the state of Ohio. We have 1,000 volunteers. We collect 15 tons of trash and 1,000 illegally dumped tires, and we've actually been cleaning the areas where new trails and parks will be built, so it has a real meaning to it. Besides that, we have a cycling event, Cycle Canalway, which is as does our partner to the south. We've teamed up with the Gateway Neighborhood and Warehouse District on the Take a Hike series, which we used to run, but now they're doing a much better job at it, I must say. And they had 2,600 people, and I'd say if you've not gone and enjoyed those hikes, you ought to. And that's going to be something we'd like to expand, and volunteers could help us do that. And finally, two things. We have a running series now calling it the Towpath Trilogy. We have a Towpath Marathon, which we're very happy to report this year. We had 2,500 runners do the marathon, the half marathon, and the 10K. And I go back to that question of why not. You know, this is one that I said, why not? Why not? Can't we not put 3 runs totaling 2,500 runners on a 12-foot wide towpath trail? Guess what? We did it. We did it, and they love it. So we're doing 2 other runs, one in the spring, a half marathon and a 5K, and then one for Father's Day, a 10 mile and 10K. So certainly we invite you all to be members and call us up and get involved and participate, I think, is the best thing to do.
Hi, Tim. Just wanted to congratulate you for all the accomplishments over the many years that I've known you. I've been happy to be helpful in any way I can the last 20 years that I've known you. I wanted to just bring up a topic that's been really close to me recently, and that is the history of agriculture in this region and the importance of sustainable food production. I'm just wondering if there's components related to those topics that are part of your plan.
Well, I think there's, first of all, Dan, thank you for the kind comments, but I think that much of what we're trying to do here in terms of creating this new kind of park really extends some of the values, if you will, of the National Park Service. And again, if I was asked to explain those, it'd be conservation and historic preservation, sensitive economic development, proper recreation, etc. Certainly, if you look at our national park, you'll see they've created a countryside program that is dealing with sustainable agriculture themselves there. So it's not that programs such as this do not complement in a very meaningful way everything we're doing, just as I'd say green building does. The question that we always face is what really fits, and a lot of this has to do with grants, what can we afford to actually promote and invest in, given the fact that our first priority has to be establishing this new kind of park. So I think that, that again, to try to simply come back and answer that question, it's something we support, certainly, in terms of ideology, in terms of product. In terms of grants, it's harder to support.
Hi, Tim. Tim's my neighbor. We live in Brooklyn Center, and it's probably the most culturally diverse neighborhood in the city of Cleveland. And I just want to say Tim is very selfless. A lot of people don't know how many sacrifices he's made in his own life just to get this to happen. And it's made a difference to people in our neighborhood, Brooklyn Center, because we have access to the zoo. We have access to Steelyard, which I want you to expound a little bit more on, because one of the things I think we're lacking in the city is we have north-south, but we don't have good east-west. And I'm amazed at what you've accomplished, but I really hope that there's some discussion, because it came up, there's some bicycle advocates in the room too. I know Kevin Cronin's here, and just bicycle access on the Interbelt was denied through ODOT, but I think the potential and the right-of-way exists where the Clark-Pershing Bridge was, and for a nexus between east and west, and that's something I'm throwing out there, because Steelyard, if some people who may not know about it don't realize how important it is to the people who actually live in the neighborhood as a place to buy materials. It's actually kind of ironic, because you're going back to the history of commerce and goods and services, and I just want to know what you think about that.
Well, I think there's a number of questions there. Let me try to sort out a couple of them. One, the connections. Joe Simperman's kindly introduced me today, and I can tell you we've been out on a hike with Joe since his boundaries have morphed into now a portion of the Big Creek Valley. And Joe is very interested in all the planning we've done to date to start to execute that connection. That will be an east-west connection between the Towpath Trail and the zoo, with connections up through Calgary Park and West 14th Street that can allow for, if you will, inputs into the neighborhood itself. In terms of the idea of the Clark Avenue Bridge, I mentioned before that there's actually, Morgana Run was built on an abandoned rail track. That rail track actually has a bridge that goes across Cuyahoga River. It's in an upright position. It's not used right now. That bridge could be utilized in the future to make that east-west connection between the village of Slavic Village, that neighborhood, and the towpath trail. And I think that's something that we're certainly supportive of, and I know that the folks at Slavic Village are interested in making that happen as well.
I'm a recent transplant. I've been a suburbanite all my life, and I just moved downtown.
Welcome.
And I can't tell you how thrilled I was to discover the Canal Basin. Most people don't realize how close it is. I mean, it's a 20-minute walk from here. And I took a tour with Historic Gateway and found that the canal actually did where it came into the Cuyahoga River. And I know that there's a good deal of land around there, but my question is, how long is it going to be before that section is actually identified as a canal basin and becomes a place that the public, other than the Carter cabin, can actually use and utilize?
Well, that's a good question. I can tell you that right now the focus of the committee that I mentioned before, which includes Metro Parks and Cuyahoga County Engineers, City of Cleveland, our organization, etc., we are working on the towpath trail. That's our first and foremost priority here. Now, we have spent money to buy additional property needed for the canal basin in the interim, and we still need a couple parcels, I think, to complete that footprint that we would most like to have and most desire to have. And I will tell you that I think strategically it is going to be the momentum of the towpath trail that will push the four partners that I've just mentioned into action on the Canal Basin Park. I mean, we could go build that park tomorrow, but theoretically. But if we did, the number one question you should ask is who's going to own, operate, and maintain it? And I want to have the best answer possible to that question, and I don't think we have it yet. I think we'll get there.
Hi, Tim. With the change of county government, how will that affect your project?
Well, that's an interesting question. The one thing, next question, no. I'm just going to repeat what I said in my remarks, that I'm not going to be here to tout one candidate over another. That's a political process. I don't enter into that. However, once that's done and we go to revisit the structure of county government, I will have strong words of advice to that particular person, whomever they may be. And those words of advice I've said before, and that is, whatever we do, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater on this, because we have an agency that is quite effective and quite efficient in the county engineer's office. And I would just hate to lose the relationship I have now with them, because they are just so important to everything that we're doing.
Hello, Tim. It's Lucy Miller. I'm trying to add some ideas to your tourism and to your marketing, and linking to what you said about New York and the original Erie Canal. Is there any thought about a passenger terminal in the lakefront or on the lakefront or with the Canal Basin Park to hook both of the canals together with the Great Lakes and expand tourism?
That's an idea. That's the first I've ever heard of that idea, Lucy. We can throw that in the idea suggestion box hopper. And see, I certainly think there's an opportunity we have not parlayed as much, and that is connecting that relationship in a more meaningful way with the Erie Canal. Again, we're all part of a transcontinental system, and certainly it behooves both of us to share what we have and to see if there might be a kind of a marketing opportunity when together we can market that experience to the nation. So thank you for your thought and idea.
Can you update us on the status of the connections between Whiskey Island, Wendy Park, and Canal Basin? And certainly been a lot of work going on there, and might be helpful to...
Well, there is a lot of work going on in these interconnections. Obviously, the original alignment of the towpath trail included a number of branches along the waterfront itself, including one that would have gone through Irishtown Bend and crossed back over to Canal Basin. Since that time, County Planning Commission has led an effort to try to push a trail connection through the peninsula over to Wendy Park. I know that they are in receipt of some funding now to design a bridge, and I know Parkworks has stepped forward to purchase property and to lead a design effort in that particular instance. Unfortunately, we have a big obstacle there in the fact that Irishtown Bend, as we understand it today, has a problem with slope stability, and a problem that won't be fixed easily. The remedies are somewhere between $84 million and $250 million. And you cannot build a trail until you remedy that particular portion. That being said, I know the City of Cleveland has put that on their priority list to try to find funding for it. I know the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is working with them to try to continue that investigation to try to find out what the right answers are. In terms of, again, the connection to Canal Basin, I think the Canal Basin District Plan that I mentioned before, that there are copies available. That is a public document, and I think that document itself looked at a number of connections that not only included the valley area itself, but how do you connect out of it in the downtown area, along the lakefront, both to the east and the west. So that kind of gives you at least an opportunity blueprint of what can be done in the future as we move forward. And I think that that's a document that was co-sponsored by the Downtown Cleveland Alliance and the City of Cleveland, as well as Ohio Canal Corridor. So it's a roadmap of sorts in terms of how you can make these connections in the future.
Hi, Tim. I must say it's a pleasure to be here today. I have a quick question for you. Now, I probably already know your answer. Your answer will probably be, there's no place like home, similar to what Dorothy would say. But for those of us who have traveled throughout the U.S., I mean, this is an exciting project for about a wonderful city that we all live in. Is there some other city right now that has had an aggressive urban renewal plan that has really worked wonderful that we could look at and say, we want to be like that you've seen in your travels?
Well, there are certainly other cities that are embracing their waterways and creating greenway systems that I think we have a lot to learn from. I'll mention two, Indianapolis and Detroit. Detroit's doing a wonderful job in terms of transforming its riverfront in downtown Detroit, and Indianapolis has spent quite a bit of money and time, and I'm going to give you the great differences between what they're doing and what we're doing, because I think that's very instructive. In both instances, the money is led by private foundations. In both of those instances, private local foundations are leading the money. Now, the reason that that's important is when I just mentioned we've raised $50 million. Well, that's all government money. You know, we've done all the government money right. They've done all the private money right. They're trying to get the government money now, and we need to awaken the local foundations and corporations to the opportunity here to invest in this project, because I think in the end, our product will more than rival what they're going to have in terms of their final disposition in both Detroit and Indianapolis. So we have good news ahead of us, but we can always learn things, and that's a quick lesson for us. Foundations come to the table.
Yes, could you speak, there's a lot of investment, and I understand that, but who utilizes this? How many people, what kind of studies do you have in terms of the numbers of people and the demographics and where they come from, and are they just people that are immediately adjacent to it, or do they come from further places to enjoy that?
We've actually done some studies trying to figure out who our customer is, as we call it, and we find that people come from both near and far, to be quite frank about it. The numbers of people are amazing. I told a story prior to the speech today that when they were building the Towpath Trail in National Park, John Debo at one of his staff meetings had people predict what the usage would be, and he was the highest one. He predicted 100,000 people a year, and he was only off by about 1.2 million. So that's the kind of usage that trail has gotten in the national park alone. We expect that once we connect into these dense urban neighborhoods of Tremont and into downtown and make this available, that we will see numbers similar to that in downtown Cleveland. Most of the people that use it, to be quite frank about it, they mirror the demographics of the area you're in. So in our case, that demographic is based on a county demographic. And you find out they're highly educated, usually you know, a good portion of them are, at least, you know, highly educated, have some expendable income, families, young and old. The wonderful thing, going back to the Towpath Marathon as an event, which, by the way, has no no sponsorship, no corporate sponsorship. Did I mention that yet? Okay. direly needs it, and somebody ought to step there. We're going to be 20 years old. But anyway, we got people from 36 states and 3 foreign countries run the Towpath Marathon this year. All by word of mouth, all by underground publicity and advertising. And people love it. You know, people do love it. And when you think about Ohio, I think we rank 6th in terms of visitation of all states. And we don't spend a lot of money on it. In fact, I would suggest that since we're going to have a boatload of new tax money coming our way from casinos, I think the total number is $600 million, that here's an idea, why don't we take like 2% of that and invest it in promoting the authentic experiences for visitors in the state of Ohio. And again, I'd suggest that the best package that will serve us in promoting that will be heritage areas. And there are about 7 different heritage areas in Ohio that would love to hear that news tomorrow, that the state would become a meaningful partner and actually bring money to the table there. And while we're at funding ideas, I can't resist. You know, we desperately need more money to build these trails. We've got a lot of trail planning underway, but you need the money to design and engineer and then build. Well, here's an idea. We seem to have, I would be shocked if I said this usually, because nobody wants to talk about new taxes. But here's one that I think is somewhat harmless, and that is the sin tax. We've used sin taxes in this city to build sports stadiums, and we've used sin taxes to support arts and culture. I'm not saying that those were bad uses of our sin tax, but what I'm going to suggest is, wouldn't it be an equally good use of a sin tax from cigarettes to support building the trail connections I've just referred to in Cuyahoga County, and even including a maintenance fund for them once they're built? Wow, if we just think if we had $14 or $15 million a year to spend on this project locally, and by the way, if you have local money, you don't need the federal money, you can move a lot quicker. You can move a lot quicker and get this thing done. So put that one in the back of your mind there and ask the question. I think some of those sin taxes may actually be sunsetting finally. I'm not sure how long the Brown Stadium has been around, but I know that, you know, some of these sin taxes will be sunsetting, and perhaps we could grab that opportunity and use it to our advantage in building the trail system I suggested.
A colleague of mine on Monday was coming through town. He was down in Canton and stumbled off the highway and ultimately ended up in the Cuyahoga Valley there along the towpath. And he was astounded how beautiful it was going through there. And he, in fact, called me to tell me that, you know, because I was supposed to be with him and I couldn't make it. But so anyhow, how do you have ideas, or are you already doing things to get people to stumble down into the valley and be your customers? Maybe just people that are driving through that might want to take that in. I know I've seen a few signs here and there, but are there other things you're doing?
Well, it's kind of interesting, you know, if you're a national park, like the Cuyahoga Valley National Park is, you will receive funding on an annual basis, but there's a little prohibition about that funding. You can't use it to market yourself. So you can't use it to go and advertise how great you are. So that has to happen off federal budget. Now, there are some friends of the national park who have started to do that on a national basis. They obviously have a friends group there as well, who's, I'm sure, is addressing this. But I would suggest that the real answer is coming your way, and that is going to be through the marketing campaign through the Ohio and Erie Canalway, which will not only feature that park, but some of the other great regional parks owned by Metro Parks here in Summit County, etc., some of those great museums. If you think of the package we have to offer, if you looked at our boundaries, you know, a Rock Hall of Fame, a Pro Football Hall of Fame, you know, a Stan Hewitt, a national park, a scenic railroad that actually goes someplace. You know, most scenic railroads go from the middle of nowhere to another middle of nowhere. Ours actually goes between cities that are thriving, that have employment centers and other things to do. So we have a tremendous package to market here, and I look forward to doing that marketing and using in the national park as one of the gems in terms of that visitor attraction.
Hey, Tim. Kevin Cronin with Cleveland Bikes. I certainly appreciate all the stuff you're talking about the trails, which focus on health and recreation and things like that. But I wonder if you want to comment about some of the pure economic development stuff, helping people come into the city to enjoy gateway and sporting events or entertainment opportunities, restaurant opportunities, things like that. Do you have any comments on some of those, what that might mean to the city?
Well, I think there's been enough studies that show the value of building such trails and such systems. But let me talk about a little exercise we've done at the City of Cleveland as we prepare to pass a new transportation bill. The last transportation bill included a pilot program introduced by a fellow by the name of Oberstar out of Minnesota. Guy's very bright, very good. He helped create the Scenic Byway program, and by the way, the National Center's in Minnesota. Surprise. So he put in a pilot program called non-motorized transportation. And what it was, it awarded $25 million to 4 cities with no match requirement to go and build trail systems, bike facilities to help address alternative transportation and try to do a mode shift. So we, understanding that, we've created a grant application to be put in to the next transportation bill featuring the City of Cleveland and arguing that the transportation network I've just described will feed the 2 employment centers of University Circle and the downtown in a way that's meaningful, that can actually, in the end, produce a mode shift. And certainly I want to thank you, Kevin, because I know that the new bike station that will be opening up in downtown Cleveland was one of those products that was pushed by your organization. And it's facilities like that that you're going to need if you really want to be successful in delivering just what I said, a shift in mode of transportation.
I'm not going to beat a dead horse. Still need a high level transportation east and west though, just for actual bike transportation. I know driving up and down through the valley is kind of difficult for a lot of people. But to answer what that gentleman asked before, who uses the park? I work with children, I work at a library, and the families in my neighborhood need that park. They use it extensively. I mean, one of the things that is so exciting is in the summer, families have an opportunity to ride their bike right down the hill, get on the towpath, go to the train station, put their bikes on the train for $2, go to Peninsula, and then ride back. Believe me, a lot of these parents with hyperactive kids love the chance to exhaust their kids on the way back, the ride. They can get ice cream at Carville's. They go to Yours Truly for breakfast on Sundays. So it's heavily used by families. I cannot tell you how much it means to our neighborhood. But I just want to say it's heavily used. If people haven't been out and enjoyed it on a fall weekend, this is a perfect chance to see how much it's used.
And speaking before we entered the room here with Councilman Simperman, I know he said his wife actually gets him out there. He's a little hyperactive. It's a way for him to burn some of the energy off on a weekend.
Tim, 6 years ago we were having a meeting at the Flatiron Cafe, just the 2 of us, and I was lamenting the loss of a guy that was leaving Cleveland to go to Chicago. And you said something to me that I'll never forget, and it was simply, why would anybody leave Cleveland? And it was right then and there that I guess I've then agreed, and I've always agreed with your point about your optimism for the city and your contagious optimism. And just to go off trail for a second with that, curious if you could give some observations about your sources of optimism for Cleveland and why people shouldn't leave Cleveland.
Well, Chris, you're one of the reasons people shouldn't leave Cleveland, as is... But I think, when I look around this room, I find a lot of other reasons not to leave Cleveland. Again, I don't know from where this springs. I've had an eternal love for this city since I was a kid, and love doesn't go away. I did spend 9 months in Detroit, Michigan once upon a time, actually working for the Census Bureau. I always kiddingly say if you want to learn how to love Cleveland, live in Detroit for 9 months. Don't take it personal, Detroit. My cousins are still there. But, I think we have the greatest people that I've ever met. And people that come here always are surprised at how great it is. How shocking. We don't have any friends in the media, at least I don't. And, and I will say to you, though, that there's such great stories to tell. And I hope I told one here today. And I thank you all for your time and patience. And I bring back Ellie to the microphone. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. That was very, very inspiring and very, very enjoyable. Today at the City Club, we have been listening to a special program featuring Tim Donovan, Executive Director of the Ohio Canal Corridor. Thank you, Mr. Donovan, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This program is now adjourned.